It is the 75th anniversary of WDUN, and joining me right now is Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. How are you?
I'm doing great, and obviously you're doing wonderful. 75 years.
Yes, and I don't look a day over.
Isn't that great?
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I know it's not you, but it's just a
company.
tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the Jacobs really have been visionaries in this community. And especially in this generation that we're in now, is that Jay Jacobs started an online newspaper in 1999 when people didn't understand monetizing something like that. And there were several years where we didn't make money on it. But he also has had 24-hour news during all that time. And that's what's allowed us to keep a separate entity from Atlanta. Atlanta hasn't just gobbled us up. We've been able to keep our own community.
Thank goodness you haven't been gobbled up.
That's right. That's right. And I'm an Atlanta girl. I grew up in DeKalb County. I mean, it was laughing when people talk about elections. You know, I always laugh because when I was growing up in DeKalb County, when I started to vote in the 70s, DeKalb and Fulton were always a problem. This is nothing new. Okay, this has been around forever.
Well, we're working on that. Obviously, we had Fulton County under review after 2020. They did a full report. Our monitor actually wrote a 350-page report, and they're making great strides. I'm really excited, really what I see from the county level, county election directors, with the organization they have, Gavrio, increasing the professionalism of all election workers. Obviously, in Hall County, do a great job here. We've actually recognized them for their management of elections. We do that with we have what's called the Eagle Award. We go up from county to county, different ones that have just excel at that highest level. You want every county to get those results posted up quick, but everyone know that we have fair and honest elections here in Georgia. It's important for us, obviously, but it's important for all everyday hardworking Georgians that need to know we have fair, accurate elections.
So if you're someone that maybe hasn't voted since 2020, I know we had a big turnout in 2022, but there are people that only vote presidential elections. What are the updates that have been made on how we do elections since 2020?
Well, actually, really can go back to since I took office. As a small business owner and as a conservative Republican, I've been working for hardworking Georgians. I want to make sure we have honest elections. So number one, we got a verifiable paper ballot. Also, people always talked about the voter rolls, and we actually have now the cleanest voter registration system in the country. The reason is one of the things we joined that multi-state organization, but then through the Department of Driver Services, they share information. So let's say you move to another state and get a Texas driver's license, Montana, doesn't matter which state it is, then our Department of Driver Service will be notified. And we get that information, and then we can reach out to that person. Have you actually moved to that state? And then we can begin to take people off the voter rolls. We also then follow, national death records and chain of address. So we have very clean voter rolls. And I'm actually the first Secretary of State because I understand how important this is. I believe this was in my stump speech back in 2018. I just have always believed that only American citizens should be voting in our elections. And I'm the first Secretary of State to do a 100% verification of citizenship of our voter rolls. And from that, I can come out and I can talk to hardworking Georgians and say, hey, folks, I've made sure that only Americans are voting in our elections. You have to be a citizen. You have to meet all the qualifications, and that's really important.
I've always thought there's unique challenges for states like ours that are fast growing, okay, because you have a lot of people moving in, not as many moving out, but that's a good thing, right? And you joined, I think it's called ERIC, right?
Yes.
But there was some pushback about ERIC from certain groups of people. But it seems to me, and I've interviewed them, I've participated on the calls, I've done all of that. It seems to me it makes perfect sense because you want to know if someone's moved. And probably the last thing somebody's going to do is contact the voter registration office and say, hey, I moved. That's probably something nobody does. So why do you think there was pushback on this? And what does ERIC bring us?
ERIC is the Electronic Registration Information Center, and the board of directors are all the states that are members of it. And we joined back in 2019 when I became Secretary of State. But many of the states had already joined, for example, Alabama. But then they chose the Gateway Pundit came out with an article and just disparaged what ERIC was doing, and so they got out of it. And so we still remained with some other Republican states along with the other Democrat states. We exchange information with those states, but then say Alabama, Virginia, and other states that aren't part of ERIC. And then there are some states that never joined ERIC just because they were concerned about the cost. So we have all these bilateral agreements. So now we get the bilaterals between Alabama and ourselves information from Eric, then also from Department of Driver Services. And that's why we have the cleanest voter rolls in the entire country, because Alabama doesn't get Eric information. And I don't know if they get all their Department of Driver Service information. We do. And so we make sure that we can tell voters we have identified who they are. We also are tracking people as they move. You brought up about movement, and people don't realize about 11 to 13% of all Americans move every year. And that could be within the county. So you move from, say Fulton County to come up to Hall County to live. Well, you got to update your voter rolls. But then all of a sudden people move maybe to another state. And that dynamic mobility is really tough to track. In fact, one of the biggest problems we have right now is federal law. And when we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, Congress did nothing on updating NVRA, which means that 90 days before an election, you cannot update your voter rolls because of federal law. And yet 30 days before an election, you can still be putting people onto the voter roll. Just think about that delta of people moved around the state. And so, people, hardworking Georgians are saying, what's going on here? Well, we need to talk to our Congress to change federal law. But we're making sure only American citizens vote in our elections, and people, are identify correctly that they are in the right precincts. A lot of moving parts.
So, and I hope you won't take offense at this, but I have often described you as the guy that in January of 2021 nobody wanted to have lunch with, and you went to where you had this big win at the end of 2022. I hope you're not offended by that. You worked hard through all of that to continue to not only defend your position, to explain your position, and to make things better. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, we've been continue to push back because as a small business owner, you always learn we have to find a solution to issues. So number one, we now have photo ID for all forms of voting. I ran back in 2018. I said, why are we using signature match? It seems awfully subjective to me. And we actually have been sued by political parties. And guess which ones? Both of them. Republicans, Democrats said this is subjective. And I said, yes, that's what I said back in 2018. With SB 202, we have photo ID for all forms of voting. You want to vote, no excuse absentee voting? It is now based on photo ID. What that has done, it's really elevated security, but also voters have confidence in that. Oh, you've now correctly identified. We have no question about signatures. We have their photo ID. Yes. Show up early, photo ID. Election day, photo ID. Then we've added 17 days of early voting, and now we have some further improvements, enhancements that we believe that the governor will look favorably upon. One of those is that the results have to be posted for all the early voting, all those absentees, by 8 o'clock on election night, 1 hour after polls close. Those early results will be uploaded. And then what you're really looking at is any absentees or early votes that just for some reason didn't get tabulated, which would be a very minor portion, but it'll be actually election day voting. So you're going to get your results a whole lot quicker, leaves less time for conspiracies, but also gives voters confidence in the process.
So what are some changes that happened from this legislative session?
Well, right now we're looking at what actually does get signed, but I think that is a big one, actually getting the results posted up quickly. We've had security paper from day one, but now we're going to put a watermark on all the ballots. So coming up in November, didn't have time to get that for the May primary, but coming up in November, there'll actually be a watermark there, and it'll be the state seal, on a watermark. So you have actually security fibers. If you shine it under a light, you can tell that is actually not, paper from the local office depot, but it's actually a security paper, and it'll have a watermark on it. So those two elements there. Then all the ballot images, all, say, 5 million plus ballots that we have, the absentees, earlies, election day, we'll have those ballot images in the Secretary of State's computers, and that's available for all the voters in Georgia to go ahead and take a look at it, and they can go ahead and do their own recounts if they want to. We've also added additional audits. That gives voters confidence.
And that's been the big issue, right? Because I'm sure you still get questions, right, about this or that, or why didn't you do this or that. There's still a faction out there that has concerns, and I think that's what we're working towards, is to have confidence in the elections.
Well, and we now have probably talking about a little bit of national stuff going on with Biden's open borders. People are really concerned about out-of-control immigration, and right along with that. Will they
vote? Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, illegal immigrants actually voting, non-citizens voting in our elections. What we've done in Georgia is we actually made it with the legislation that's before the governor right now to stop foreign, funding of elections and foreign interference of elections. We think if you're retained as a business, you're a political consultant or some kind of lobbyist, that you should register if you're working for a foreign a corporation, foreign entity. You just imagine if someone was actually working for Iran or China. We think you just let us know who you're working for, so it's all transparent, so voters understand. That was really key legislation we passed.
Now, I know the only thing you do is not elections, but this is election season, so people think about it. There have been a lot of improvements in the other parts of the Secretary of State's office. Tell us a little bit about some of that.
Well, as it relates to election licensing, we've had some reforms, some bills that we passed through the General Assembly. We really worked hard on. Last year, we formed the Georgia Works Commission to look at licensing reform. As a small business owner, licensed engineer, I think it's really important that we streamline that for all license holders. And so how do we help them? So number one, if you move here to Georgia and you have a very similar license, then really we're going to be able to give you a quick license very quickly based on you have a qualification in other states. That's number one. Military families, military spouses. You come here. We don't say you go to the front of the line, but you go to the front of the line to make sure we can expedite that. So within 60 days, you'll have your license so you can begin to put food on the table for your families. That's really important. So we have those two innovations. Now we're also working on, and we'll have the launch for the new software program 2025. That'll be up and ready. We've done some testing with some of the license holders to really streamline that. It's a 20-year-old software system, needed to be upgraded for a couple things. It's 20 years old, and also we have a lot more folks that are holding professional licenses now. Nurses is our largest licensed profession holders.
Well, and it seems to be a problem throughout government, which I know you are not a career government person, is that all the technology's old. I mean, you can't update it fast enough. It does seem like it's slowing down, that the software we're getting now is lasting a little longer. Do you know what I'm saying? Yep. But it's a problem with government all the way around. They're too slow.
Well, that really happened with the voting machines. That company went out of business. Look at our software that we have. The old software system for professional licensing, not supported anymore. Things have changed. So now we have really companies that, are publicly traded. We think they'll have more staying power and we'll get continuous updates. So it's not such a big, wrench, in the monkey works when you start being able to do some updates. So we'll be able to do continual updates. And as a business owner, we update it all the time to stay abreast of all of our competitors, to stay ahead of market trends. So I think this will really help, the Office of Secretary of State for Professional Licensing.
So if people need help from the Secretary of State's office, how can they do that?
Go online, sos.ga.gov, and we'll be there.
Brad Raffensperger, thank you for being with me today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take you up to the top of the hour.